Hey, what's up? This is going to be a quick video on using all these different types of tools, things to use, things not to use, because sometimes if an object is too broad or not more specific, you're not going to get to the spot that you need. So if you have a baseball, lacrosse ball, this is going to be used for upper body, maybe the pecs, the traps, etc. So you're going to see that this is how big this surface area is. This is good for just general work, more than like what a foam roller might do, because what we can do with this, the foam roller is going to be super broad on this, versus now it's a little more specific, and we'll get into other ones as well. So if I go on the wall, this is going to go right around here. So I always reference the collarbone, because we're going to get the pec minor. So if I go collarbone and then 1 inch down, 1 inch in, that's more getting towards where the pec minor is going. Obviously, if you had a thumb, an actual therapist putting their thumbs in might be more specific. But what we're getting at is, I'm going to lean against the wall, and then I can turn my head because the wall is pretty flat, obviously. And then I can roll left, right. As I'm rolling, I'm leaning into the wall. And then once I find a spot, I'm gonna like move my arm up and down, or maybe even away if I have that mobility. So I'm leaning, finding a spot, going up and down, making sure I stay away from a bone, where I can even pull off the wall. And I can do both sides, obviously. So that's for the pec minor. If your pecs are like relatively tight, another area that not many people even think about is that the attachment of the sternum for the pec major. So sternum's in the middle. So if you move an inch over, you start feeling this muscly thing, that's your pec major. So you can put the ball there, or you can just use your own fingers to kind of get that job done, because sometimes the pec will start to pull on the sternum, so it might go this way or that way, or even kind of pull it into an extended position, which is probably not the best. But what we're trying to get across is, if you can go here, that is going to start to improve how this feels, at least afterwards. All right, so this is using a baseball, or even if you have a lacrosse ball, same idea there. Another area to hit, we could use a different item, like one of these things. We can go into sort of our arms, like the back of our triceps. That's where a lot of the rotator cuff muscles kind of attach. So this is your tricep, obviously, but you have a lot of other muscles right around here that kind of attach. And we're going to kind of discover. So I always say to some kids, and obviously adults, when we're moving around, you're just discovering what is tight or what is not tight. That's neither a diagnosis or otherwise, because what we want to get across is this doesn't feel normal. And what I want to get is something to feel normal. So we're going to find that not normal kind of thing and then stay there. And then you could do one of two things. You could just stay there, putting pressure going downwards, or you can move on top of that. So while I find a spot, maybe like right here, I can move or I can move. So while applying pressure. So I know it's a lot to kind of take all at once, kind of moving while staying still. It's kind of a contradiction, but give it a shot. Let me know what you think of that. So that's for the rotator cuff and that attachment. Some of the other rotator cuff muscles don't come from here and they go to that spot that I was just talking about. So with that being said, we can use a couple different things. We can either use the same thing, baseball, lacrosse ball, or one of these guys. These are good because they don't run around. So the pros and cons with this, if you plant it against the wall and then you kind of sit on top of it, it doesn't move. So you don't lose that baseball or lacrosse ball, kind of runs around the floor. You spend half the time picking up the ball. You could also lay on the ground to do it. But if I'm here and I'm putting it against this part of my arm, perhaps where like the infra spinatus kind of runs through, I can now do some ERs and IRs, external, internal rotations on top of it. On top of this, I can do some extension of my arm. So with this being said, this guy is really broad as well. Despite this, if we think of it, this is really where we're looking for tension. We're not really looking for tension down here because we're not really rolling on that. So with that being said, if we wanted to get something a little bit more specific, we could use a stick, but this would be a little bit more difficult because it's just a stick. So I like to use a towel, maybe a t-shirt you fold on top of it, and then you're gonna put this on kind of whatever spot that doesn't feel so great. I like to use this for the subscap because subscap is really tough to get to, because what we're gonna try to get is, it's basically, if we look at the attachment of it, it goes kind of like under here, and it goes under behind the scapula, which is impossible to get to. So if we can get this side of the subscap, we're getting at least something out of it. So something in my head is better than nothing. So my reference point is the humerus bone, so basically the armpit bone, and then we're going to go underneath it to the side. So that's basically we're going to sit. It might not feel so great. I'm going to apply some downward pressure. I'm going to hold the stick so I don't just impale myself. and then I'm going to move my arm, and I'm going to move my arm. So there's the same element of discovery, what's tight, and then moving after I do find that tight spot. All right, so that got pec, anterior. We didn't really get the delt. We'll get that in a second. We got some of the arm, triceps you can do as well, biceps you can do as well with a stick. And then we got some of this back stuff here. Let's get that deltoid, and then let's get the some of the rhomboids as well, because that kind of limits some of our scapular motion. So the delt, anterior delt, and we also get some of this, just the middle portion, fibers, if you will. So this is what's going to lean against the wall. So I could use either a lacrosse ball or otherwise, and I'm leaning against the wall, and then I can move away, move up and down, same idea as before. And then you can go from there. This portion, the acromion is here, so that's our reference point, and then you're going to move like 1 inch down. So I'm leaning into the wall, and then I can just move my arm left and right a bit. So that's getting into some of that tension with that, with keeping that in mind. The last part is a little bit different. So this is our shoulder blade in between rhomboids, and we're just going to sit there. So obviously you can't see it, but what we're trying to get is the action of protraction. Rhomboids retract, and they also downwardly rotate the scaps. So we're going to reach, protraction, and then maybe just a little bit upward, depending on where you're at and where that's tight. So you're kind of doing this like punching, kind of reaching motion, and you're not just getting the rhomboids, but you're also getting a little bit of serratus kind of activation, kind of the opposing muscles there. So that's a lot of the different ways we can make ourselves better just with a couple of random tools.